Excellencies, colleagues, friends, students, good afternoon. Thank you for attending today's event. I am honored to introduce today's guest, Italian Vice Minister of Foreign Affairs and International Cooperation, Her Excellency Emanuela C. Del Rey. Her Excellency is a politician and diplomat after our heart in academia because she comes directly from being a professor and teacher in our areas of interest here at Georgetown University in Qatar. A sociologist by training, she is an expert in conflict studies, migration, refugee issues, minorities, and religious phenomena. Prior to her appointment to her current role last year, she was a tenured researcher obtaining the title of Associate Professor of Sociology by the Italian Ministry of Education and Research and serving as Jean Monnet Professor and Course Coordinator on European Cultures, Citizenships and Governance in the Faculty of Communication Sciences of the University La Sapienza of Rome, where she had taught for many years. At GUQ, we are calling this year the Year of Research, in part because we just recently celebrated the 100th book published by GUQ affiliated faculty and staff since the campus opened in 2005. So it is with a great interest that we note that Ms. Del Rey's research pedigree is quite relevant to what we do. She has carried out longitudinal field research in conflict areas and areas in transition since 1990, following the social, political, economic transformation of countries and regions such as the Balkans, the Caucasus, North Africa, and the Middle East. She has held research positions at the European University Institute, the University of Rome, and is a member of the Scientific Committee and Editing Board and regular contributor to various leading scientific magazines. And she directs the book series Globalitical. She was elected National Coordinator of the Sociology of Religion section of the Italian Sociological Association in 2017. A prolific author, her work has been published in many peer-reviewed publications, and furthering the dissemination of her research, she has directed a number of documentaries and is a contributing member of various think tanks, institutes, and organizations. Her latest book, published by IB Tauris in 2018, is titled Women and Borders, Refugees, Migrants, and Communities. Reflecting what she believes to be the true role and responsibility of a scholar, she combines research with intervention projects. She is active in the Secretariat of the Forum for Cities in Transition, which operates in more than 40 cities in conflict areas. And we just were chatting about Tripoli in particular. She was a founder of EPOS International, a mediating and negotiating operational agency active in conflict areas with projects for the reconstruction of civil society. She has created My Future project for the Syrian refugees in Iraq and Jordan, and Modo Religioni, which is the word of religions, which is an initiative promoting interreligious dialogue and citizenship awareness on religions. She has also been an international electoral observer for the UN, the EU, OSCE on more than 15 missions.
I had the opportunity to visit the Education Above All Foundation this morning. I mean, this visit to Qatar is becoming for me seriously a milestone in understanding many dynamics in this region, which was one part that I didn't know before. I'm starting to know it now, and I'm really very glad that our ambassador here invited me together with Georgetown University to give me this fantastic opportunity. I think I'm very much enriched by this experience, and I really want to thank all those who have organized it. I'm here also to share some views with you, of course, otherwise I wouldn't have been invited somehow to speak here, because I think that the Italian model of international development cooperation, of which I am the minister, And I just give you one first element on the system that we have in Italy in particular. I am the Minister of International Cooperation because we have a special position for Vice Minister of Foreign Affairs to be actually appointed by the Council of Ministers. It's not just an appointment that is, let's say, simply based on recognition, but it is actually also approved by the Council of Ministers because I manage all the money related to international cooperation, and therefore I know the responsibility. I'm fully aware of the shoulder, the burden on my shoulders, but also I am very proud because this gives me the fantastic opportunity. And I really want to thank those who asked me to become a candidate, from being part of the civil society and being an academic, become a member of the parliament and be appointed as Vice Minister of Foreign Affairs with this specific capacity, which I find really something that deserves a lot of attention and also makes me very proud, obviously, of being the person that it constitutes the reference point for my country and at international level for this particular chapter. Obviously, the reason why I want to share these views with you is because, for many reasons. I mean, Italy is obviously one of the founding members of the European Union. When I say founding members, I mean people who believed strongly in the European Union from the very beginning. Sometimes I think about the founding fathers, and some were Italian, of course, who were in the middle of the Second World War. And it was one of the most destructive wars in the history of human beings, of course. And you can imagine these people were having a dream, and they were thinking of building something that would bring peace. And as you know, our countries have been in peace for the last 70 years now, and also bring prosperity, thinking about the population, creating opportunities, a sound welfare, and so on. So Italy was a founding member of the European Union, is now a member of the European Union. Obviously, I would say in the range, probably I would say that we are the third in the European Union, but second for manufacturers. And also we are obviously an important country in bringing ideas and culture, dynamics, opportunities. And this makes us not only proud, but also, very responsible, because what we do is something that has an impact on the rest of the world. In this sense, our concept of international development cooperation, which has been going on for the last few decades, actually, is not something new, has gone through different evolutions. I mean, we started thinking that we had to help third countries, the so-called third countries, in developing their own economies, their own societies, and all the rest. But over the years, of course, the mentality has changed. I think that the very strong impulse came with this particular century, with the development of the new global networks due also to social media, internet connections, and so on. And therefore, things had to change accordingly. You cannot be static, or you cannot think that society is something that is stuck forever in one single condition. You need to adjust the situation to the evolving dynamics of the global society. In this sense, Italy, as I said, always contributed very much. We have had projects ongoing for the last decades, which have been giving their fruits, during the time. For instance, by creating vocational training and then seeing people developing their own startups and their own factories in the countries that are beneficiaries, but also. At the moment, we are trying to change the mentality in moving a step forward, in the sense that we are very, very aware of the fact that the world has changed because of the impulse I was saying, and therefore the people who are our beneficiaries are not anymore people only in need. There are large parts of the populations in need, but the most part are people who become our partners. So this is a complete change of mentality and philosophy, thinking of third countries before as simple beneficiaries, end user of some projects that were developed in our country, and now making them instead partners, part of the process in which we define what is needed, what they need in their own country, part of the process in which we decide, for instance, how to use the funds, part of the project because they are partners in the implementation of the projects on field. For instance, when we have NGOs working on field in different areas, usually they partner with local NGOs or local personnel, and in this way, this is something that develops together. And this is what I usually define the concept of shared development. Not something that is given from the top down, but it's actually something that we develop together. It's not easy to develop this idea. It's not easy to implement this concept because there is a lot of prejudice still in the world. I think we need to change the narrative, especially regarding third countries. And this is something that our countries are trying to do, but it's still quite complicated. For instance, we still think that our relationship with third countries is always unilateral, meaning, and unidirectional as well, meaning again, donor, beneficiary. And that is the end of it. We have done our duty, we are helping the societies to develop, but we don't understand that, in fact, the situation at the moment is completely changed. So we have a bidirectional and bilateral relations, because the development that occurs in a third country is the development that is also occurring in our home countries for a number of global dynamics, not only migration, because migration is at the moment the most discussed issue, but not only migration. I think the very important part is the fact that we are interdependent, we are interconnected, and we cannot think that a continent for Africa, for instance, that I always describe as the continent of the future, can be neglected or considered a minor continent simply because it is developing. The fact that it's developing is something that is actually an added value, because in this sense we can develop together, and our development will be directly dependent on their own development as well. So we have a huge responsibility. We can share our experience, our lessons learned, our own approaches, but obviously in partnership with them, because they know what they want to do. They know what they need. Nowadays, we have middle classes that are very much established. We have interlocutors who are absolutely capable of deciding for themselves. Only maybe we can provide proper tools. We have experience in certain fields. And one thing I appreciated very much when I visited the Horn of Africa recently is the fact that they usually say, we don't want to sell ourselves away. We don't want to produce low-quality manufactures or other things. We want to have quality. And obviously, I'm Italian. I can say that what Italy can offer, we cannot just sign a check and give, 3 billion euros, because nowadays no European country is able to do that, unlike some Arab countries, I admit. But that is true. But what we are capable of offering, obviously, is quality and innovation. In that, we are unbeatable, no doubt, especially Italy, because this is something on which we have created our own reputation at global level, and I think that this is something that we have the responsibility and the duty to offer to the rest of the world. Because now that the world is so interconnected, obviously what we can offer must be offered because it returns to us with a huge added value in our own development for the future, building the future together. So this is something that is reflected in the current approach to development cooperation in Italy. We have made a reform in 2014 in which we decided, for instance, to separate international development cooperation from the Ministry of Foreign Affairs, because before it was just an office in the Ministry of Foreign Affairs, and make it become also an independent agency that is a sort of operational arm of the political arm, so that we distinguish the responsibilities and there is more active action, because obviously if you have one agency with a huge number of employees, experts, people working on field, obviously with the bureaucratic body on its own and so on, that means that it's become more functional. Obviously, it is devoted specifically to this particular part of our policy, and therefore it is more efficient. When I say policy with a strong sense of the term, because I consider, and this is my own thinking, but I've been repeating this now for a year, I think that international development cooperation today is the most important operational arm of Italian foreign policy. Because international development cooperation allows us to have direct relationships with different countries, offer our own expertise, talking face to face. It gives us the opportunity to be on field with the other countries and with the different populations. And also it offers us the opportunity, obviously, to sit at all the tables, decisional tables, related to development, which helps us to be part of all the processes related to building our future together, especially at global level. This is why in Italian development cooperation, obviously, we put a lot of effort in the multilateral dimension. In fact, I was saying to somebody this morning that, for instance, there are UN agencies that when I go and visit them, open their arms to me and say, we welcome you with all our heart because we are great contributors, also in terms of funds, of course. But we select these contributions, we select the agencies because we know that what we want is a true development. So we don't want to waste money. As I said, European countries at the moment are not able to give huge amounts of money for international development cooperation, although, as I said, Italy is one of the main contributors, definitely. But what is important is that the money that we give is really going to projects that are ensuring a result, ensuring that we are going in the right direction. And this is why, when we talk about international development cooperation today, obviously Italy has selected a few thematic issues, allocations, especially for our funds, which are, in a sense, reflecting the philosophy of the country, which is very much devoted to the development of societies in their whole sense of entirety. And this is why also we have an holistic approach that obviously starts from the awareness of the fact that unless individuals are happy in their own society, happy under many respects, and I will explain, societies cannot be happy. And this is something that obviously is reflected in the very strong focus that we put on women empowerment. In this, I have to say, Italy is a champion. And I spoke the other day at the Geneva, the headquarters of the UN in Geneva, at the inauguration of the year of the Council of Human Rights, to which Italy has been elected recently with the majority of votes, I have to say. And I was actually talking about this, the fact that we are very much focused on these particular issues, and we are champions. I like this word because it gives a sense of energy, participation and so on. And we are real champions in this field because we have been for a long time, and even more now that we are giving a new impulse on the front line in very important battles, such as, for instance, the fight against genital female mutilations, and also, for instance, early marriages. These are battles in which we have obtained fantastic results, and I'm very proud to share this with you, of course. So this is one of the elements on which we are focusing very much. Of course, there are global trends that are somehow to be taken into consideration. And this is why when I talk about responsibility, our responsibility in implementing this kind of approach, in looking at things as something that belongs to all of us, not just to the countries who are still considered as beneficiaries, I think is very important to take into consideration the fact that there are trends at global level that are going in another direction, saying that, for instance, development cooperation is useless, that it should only be something related to charity from different religions, because every religion has got its charitable, obviously, part of the faith, or considered something that belongs to philanthropy. And this is why some big countries are cutting their funds for international development cooperation. I'm proud to share with you the fact that Italy is going in a different direction. We are going in a different direction. We want to respect Agenda 2030. Agenda 2030 imposes that by 2030 we will have 0.7% of our gross national product devoted to what is called the public aid. We are going in that direction with some difficulties, because obviously a big country like Italy has a lot of expenses, Not always, the different political parties agree on the predominance of international development cooperation in our general policy, but we are still keeping steady on the track, and we want to reach the goal by 2030. Obviously, as you know, these goals are not easy to be achieved, for a number of reasons, because obviously, again, despite all our efforts, there are many other elements that intervene. For instance, different governments, conflicts that erupt suddenly out of the blue. And this is why we are focusing on specific countries, for instance. We have a very strong focus that ensures that there is a continuity in our approach, that we actually see the results, blossoming on the way with a sense of continuity, making the countries that are our priority focus grow together with us. We have, for instance, 11 countries in Africa, and as I mentioned to you, Africa is a specific focus for all of us. Not only for the migration issues, I said that before, because the migration issues are important. In my view, as I always say everywhere, migration is a natural aspiration of human beings. I strongly believe that it is a national aspiration. And actually, our duty is to protect it and to make sure that people don't lose their lives, when they are trying to reach another country. And probably in this philosophy goes also the fact that we have to help the people who want to migrate because they have no other option to find an option where they live, which is the aspiration of all of us. Italy was a country of migrants in the past, so we know what we are talking about, okay, like many others. But at the same time, obviously, this must be approached with different strategies. One of the strategies is international development cooperation, and this is why 30% of our funds for international development cooperation has gone to Africa in particular, because Africa is at the moment the continent which is suffering the most, obviously, from deprivation, marginalization, lack of opportunities, environment crisis, and all the rest. We have also, in this sense, given a lot of importance to an approach which is not only holistic when we go on field, but is also holistic when we think about the people who are contributing and collaborating with us. So we have a multi-stakeholder systemic approach, an integrated system that tries to put together all parts of society. For instance, at the moment, there are other countries, big countries, where, they, as I mentioned, try to pass the message that it's much better to, let's say, relegate the system of international development cooperation to specific parts of society. We believe that we have to work all together for this. So we have passed laws, even recently, to facilitate even more the participation of our bodies, institutional bodies, for loans and credits, so they become part of the economic cycle. This is something not very easy, in the sense that, for instance, we have institutions that date back, obviously, from the 1800 to the 1800 and so on, but to put them in the new system of international development cooperation required the proper law. Now we have done it because we want to make sure that when we intervene, for instance, third countries can recur to these particular bodies to get credits or loans. On the other hand, we also have, obviously, the private sector, which is very, very important. The private sector must be included, provided that they respect many important criteria like transparency, let's say a virtual cycle of interventions, but they want to be part, and they must be part of the system, because we need their help, their expertise, their capabilities, their funds as well, which is not to be underestimated. Last thing is definitely the participation of the different communities in our country, which are also reflecting communities in other countries, and that is diasporas. Diasporas for us are fundamental partners. We have a summit of diasporas, which has become part of our National Council of International Cooperation, because the communities in the diasporas, I always say to them when I speak publicly, I say, diaspora is home. Because for a person having migrated, being able to create a home in a foreign country, I think, must be recognized as something incredibly valuable. And this ability, which is not something that all of us can have, I think must be recognized as a very important added value to our own culture, but also as a bridge with the countries of origin. I think that this is very, very important. I could go on for many minutes, of course, talking about the very many projects that we have on field. I can tell you that, for instance, regarding the diasporas, we have a lot of projects in promoting micro credit, for instance, or the establishment of micro, small, and medium enterprises, on which Italy is very well recognized worldly, because we have a system of small and medium enterprises which are very, very important and also very well established. But I could also talk about many other things regarding the economic aspect. For instance, in Senegal, we have a concessional loan of 30 million euro with coaching and vocational training. But I can talk for hours because the volume of projects is immense. And who is implementing these projects? The NGOs. NGOs are the other partner of international development cooperation, which is incredibly valuable. I'm proud to say that in Italy we have a huge amount of people involved in voluntary work, 6 million people involved in voluntary work, 4 million of which are actually doing voluntary work within the specific organizations. And this is just to give you a sense of what the country is, but we have a centuries-old tradition of doing voluntary work. But the interesting thing is that the mentality is not charity, which is, as I said, to be respected completely for its fantastic value, especially at religious level, but is doing it in the sense of contributing to the new development of the world in the global system. So I think that in this sense, NGOs, which are also reflecting this very strong attitude of the Italians to participate in the destinies of the world, is a valuable capital, very important capital. Without the NGOs, obviously, we wouldn't be able to implement the system. There is a roster of NGOs which are certified and that participate in public calls, of course, in Italy, and are those who are allocated the funds in order to work on field. We all share together the concepts behind the projects that are promoted, and usually we have a monthly meeting in which we decide where the money goes, obviously, at multilateral level, bilateral level, through the NGOs, through the private sector, the diasporas contributing, and all the rest. And I think that this sort of choral attitude and holistic approach is becoming a winning strategy, and we are ready also to share it with other countries. We are already thinking about contributing also to some of the projects in Qatar and expanding also the system, creating triangular cooperation with other countries that are willing to create the same sort of systems. And I think that in this way, we are not going to solve all the problems of the world, but at least we are trying. And that's, as somebody was saying the other day, celebrating the death of a dear friend, it's not really important whether you actually realize the dream. The most important thing is having a dream. Thank you.
If I may use the prerogative of coordinating this event and ask the first question. The world in which we live is increasingly more polarized under the pressures of all sorts of crises, and this is happening at the national level, at regional levels, and globally. I know that you have your share of polarization within your country. Could you share with us ways in which you navigate this situation politically? Because I'm sure there are forces that would like to look inward and not engage in the kind of partnerships that you're talking about. And what is your advice for us? Because we also have our share of tensions that push in very different directions.
You mean from the Italian point of view?
Yes.
From the Italian point of view, we are a country that has promoted peace for the last 70 years, and we want to achieve peace in the world. Let's say we have never had a patronizing or imposing attitude. This is recognized, I think, globally, because our attitude is always to be friends and always to promote a strategy that is based on negotiation, dialogue especially. And this is probably due, obviously, to a tradition that has derived from our own participation in the global dynamics since many centuries. You know, being a country of different populations, of, welcoming pilgrims from all over the world. And this has helped, to develop this kind of attitude. At the moment, in Europe in particular, there are different trends, especially based on the fact that, we have to preserve what somebody calls the fortress of Europe, that we have to resist invasions from outside. This is a reality. This is a kind of discourse and political discourse that is actually going on in Europe at the moment, and it is dangerous because, as I mentioned, Europe is a beautiful place where there are many different ethnic groups, many different religions, many different ideas, many different interpretations of personal choices, which is another very important element. And thank God we have legislations that allow, the respect of personal freedom. Italy is nowadays facing a difficult moment because we have, a big discussion which reflects the discussion at European level regarding how to manage migrations, for instance. And this influences very much also our perception of other countries in the world. We are obviously confronted with recent crises like Libya. We are confronting with other elements like, Sudan the other day, unfortunately, or other changes in history. What is very important is that we try to keep the track in remaining a moral, reference, sticking to our constitution, sticking to our legislation that is absolutely doesn't allow any kind of misinterpretation of personal freedom and respect for the others. It is a challenge, and this influences very strongly, our view of other countries as well. But what I always say, and I told you earlier on when we were having a small snack, the most important thing is legislations. As long as the legislation is there and it's defending human rights and position of human beings and personal choices, we are safe. So it's a battle to defend our achievements during history.
Good afternoon. We are happy that you are here with us today, and we take this opportunity of your presence, of your experience and your know-how to ask something important, which is giving a threatening to Italy nowadays. The conflict in Libya, with the threatening of Sarraj of sending 800,000 immigrants to Italy and to Europe. How are you planning, from your point of view, to cope with this situation? Thank you.
If there is a situation of conflict and people are running from a conflict, obviously they become refugees. So this changes the mentality completely. Regarding the management of the crisis, we are thinking of what to do in this very moment. I mean, there are decisions taken, but we have, as Italians, funded for the last few years the UNHCR and the IOM to face the migrant crisis, especially in the camps that were somehow possible to visit and to offer some kind of aid. But at the moment, we are also thinking about humanitarian corridors, which are, I didn't mention it before, but this is something that is particularly dear to me. It's an Italian model that has been established in the last few years and is becoming a very established model by which people migrate in a safe way, not only migrating and finding a shelter, but also finding in the country of welcoming a project for the future. This has been possible in the last few years for about 5,000 people, We want to expand this, and because the model has already been replicated by the Germans and by the French, we want to make sure that this will become a European project and also applicable in cases of crisis like Libya. Of course, in that case, we should ensure that the people migrate if they're refugees, they're running away from a conflict in a safe way.
Hi, my name is Malak Edmour. I'm a sophomore here at Georgetown and I'm majoring in international politics. I was just very interested in what you had said about the internal projects that you were working on in Italy in regards to the migrants and the diaspora that live there. And I just wanted to know a little bit more about how exactly Italy is approaching facilitating the integration of these diasporas and these migrants, and especially in terms of refugees as well. I'd be very interested in knowing more about this.
Well, Italy has been working on this for the last, let's say, 40 years, 50 years almost, because the big waves of migration to Italy started in the 70s. So we started from there. We have very established Tunisian communities, Moroccan communities, for instance, and nowadays the biggest communities are Albanian, for instance, Romanian, from Nigeria. I mean, we have a large number of different communities. Our system of integration is very good because children can go to school for free, and everybody has access to public health for free, even irregulars. Even irregulars can go to school, state schools, of course, for free. And we have a huge system of integration that works. For instance, the Albanians who arrived in terrible conditions, fleeing from a very fierce dictatorship 25 years ago, especially in 1991, 1992. They are now so established that we have, for instance, 35,000 enterprises by Albanians in Italy. They are the most married community by Italians because, so we have lots of mixed marriages, not to mention many others, of course, that are very established. So we have schemes for integration. It's a different thing if you are referring to, our centers for identification for migrants and so on. We have these centers. Obviously, they are not in prison, so they can stay or leave if they want. Most of the people who come through that system don't want to stay in Italy, but they prefer to migrate to Northern Europe, which has been a problem, as you have, if you have studied these things. I can tell you more. You can write to me, and I can send you also some essays and things. But obviously, that is a problem because, as you know, we have a system by which, if you land in a specific country, you have to stay there, which has created a lot of problems, and is one of probably of the most important political debates at European level at the moment. In terms of integration in Italy, I would like to say that people are integrated. As I mentioned, the level of, let's say, also acceptance is very high. In the very last year, I think we have had 3 or 4 episodes which were not acceptable, that could be defined as racist episodes, which are a shame for the whole of the country, of course. But with the climate that has been created at European level, I'm keeping on in my own territory, regarding migration, I am afraid that this could escalate if we don't keep, steadily in reminding people that we are democratic countries. We have, the opportunity to obviously welcome any kind of foreigner, and we have to provide safety to all. The debate at political level, anyway, is very heated at the moment regarding this specific issue. But as regards integration, I invite you to Italy and see for yourself, because it is a very nice model, definitely. Also because it differs from the assimilation model of the French, for instance. We don't impose, people to assimilate completely to our own system. Obviously, if you are in Italy, you have to respect the Italian laws, but it's different also because we had the opportunity to approach our model of integration after, learning from the experience of the French and the Germans and the Brits, for instance. And so we had the opportunity to develop our own model, which is, I find, a very good compromise between the different approaches. And this is why people are quite serene, I would say.
And my question, you mentioned earlier that there are different trends in Europe in regards to migration, but I guess also different trends in regards to development. In your position, how do you deal with development models that kind of oppose yours? So for example, recently we've been seeing the French have been having kind of issues with the EU in regarding to condemning the attack on Tripoli, even though it's the UN-sanctioned government. So I have a question. How do you kind of see the Libyan question moving forward? And what do you think is the role of Italy moving forward, especially when other European powers are involved in a very opposing manner?
As I mentioned before, Italy is always for dialogue, and this is our winning strategy, to be very honest, and this is why we have good relations with everybody. Regarding Libya at the moment, we are continuing to say that we are supporting the UN and that we want, obviously, to have a ceasefire, that no military solution is acceptable whatsoever. But our approach and what role we can have in this particular crisis is the role of mediators, of dialogue, of offering a platform for discussion, but absolutely not intervention. Other countries can do what they want, but what I want to tell you is also that our embassy is the only embassy open at the moment in the country, which shows also that we are ready to be close to the people and to offer a service to everybody, because this is what is absolutely needed. But Italy is always for dialogue and support the UN.
Thank you very much for coming. My name is Tariq El-Bakri, and I'm from the International Programs of Education Above All. The Italian NGOs and the Italian international programs have always been carried, from my experience, in different places of the world, at the forefront of crisis zones or conflict zones, with a lot of integrity and a lot of compassion and empathy towards local communities. And there seems to be a lot of work from their side on advocacy and influencing European policies. So how was that supported by the Italian government in terms of the international cooperation, or how has it been reconciled given these dynamics? The other question that I have, if you don't mind, you've mentioned the component about heavy investment from the Italian government in vocational training at, during the journey of the evolvement of aid, of international aid. If you can highlight some of the lessons learned from that journey, that would be really helpful. Thank you.
Regarding NGOs, NGOs are, as I said, a very important component. As you mentioned, they've always been on the front line. I have worked with NGOs as well on field in different countries. And if you are referring to the ability of NGOs to influence the policies and government, it's obvious because they have a perspective from the field that others don't have. So when you take, let's say, an NGO and the NGO refers to you what kind of perception they have on field, it's a unique perception that is obviously going to influence the decisions of the person in the government or decision maker in general. So we respected the NGOs very much. There has been a discussion in Europe recently regarding the NGOs who are running these programs in the Mediterranean Sea. This is true. We have to be open also because you are scholars and you have a certain degree of awareness regarding this field. But this has nothing to do with the huge importance that we give to NGOs in our own development programs, so much that, as I mentioned before, we have not only a roster of specific NGOs that are entitled to funds above 2 million, for instance, but we have a huge amount of NGOs that get smaller funds, participate in, let's say, programs with other NGOs in the world, so they are part of consortia. So there is a huge system of NGOs taking, their own role in the general system of development cooperation. The discussion about some NGOs that are taking their own initiatives and working in the Mediterranean with the idea of saving lives, but are not seen by some governments as legitimate actors, that's another story that goes in another direction and is very much related to that specific issue, not to the general issue of NGOs. I myself have meetings with NGOs all the time. We have sometimes sectorial meetings, like, for instance, all the NGOs working in Syria, or all the NGOs working in Libya, or all the NGOs working in Iraq, or sometimes they are transversal, all the NGOs working on empowerment of women, all the NGOs working in agribusiness or something. So it's a dialogue that is constant, almost daily, and this is, I think, incredibly fruitful and incredibly important. Regarding some lessons learned, we have learned what I've mentioned before, the fact that things have changed, and what before was perceived as a sort of donation, meaning that it would come with a complete packet of ideas that were, proposed to the host country or the beneficiary country with a sense of, know-how that was only possible to transfer from our country to their country. Nowadays, the lessons learned is that the countries with which we work within the international development cooperation are partners. And this is a huge, huge change of mentality. In some countries, I have to say, some countries, even in Europe, are not there yet. Okay, so I'm proud to say that Italy is there already, and we are very much aware of the fact that we have partners. We don't have people who are, receiving something from us, and obviously they have, let's say, to adjust to our own programs, to our own model. We are developing the model together. So this is what we have learned, certainly, from years of experience on field.
My name is Mongoljan Batsahan. I'm an economist, so I have a little bit of an academic question. You're coming from an academic background, so was there any change within your institution in terms of implementing evidence-based policies? Because evidence-based policies, implement what we learn in academia and then make sure that the policies are actually implemented. Money is spent toward the most, effective policies. So the reason that I'm asking is you mentioned about two different policies. One is training. One is the training in Africa, and then the other one is in general empowering, like microfinance. So if you look at the academic evidence, the training is completely ineffective for small businesses, no matter where you look at it, especially for women. And in the long run, there's a zero effect. If you look at the impact of microfinance on empowering women, there's literally there's a very recent series of papers that's published recently in Top Economics Journal that indicates that literally zero impact from microfinancing to empowering women. We, measured all sorts of different ways, but still international organizations keep pushing money to microfinancing, keep pushing these training programs that are not very effective. So I'm just wondering whether, there was some sort of discussion in terms of looking at these evidences and incorporating to your policymaking process, and is there any cooperation between academia and policymaking?
First of all, I'm an academic and I'm doing politics. So, the equation is, apart from anything, I don't know, you read only very pessimistic literature. We have to help this gentleman. Who volunteers to have a different approach? No, I don't have this pessimistic approach at all. This is part, be careful. This is the academic speaking. This is part of a strategy. Of demolishing these models that we have developed. Now I'm presenting the Italian model. Obviously, I respect other models. For instance, this Qatar initiative for education above all and so on is incredibly valuable and interesting also for its impact and so on, as far as the numbers say as well. I've been well trained this morning on this. But I just tell you, be careful, because there is an ideology nowadays trying to convince us that whatever we do is useless because the governments of these countries are corrupted, the populations are unable to, let's say, upgrade their social status and all the rest. This is absolute rubbish. Forgive me for saying this, but this is very ideological. So be careful. If you are a scholar, you have to balance, understand and know what is said by a very strongly ideologized scholars, because there are many, and also find your own way of experimenting things. There are many different sources. Also, when you analyze the sources, be very careful where the source comes from, whether the data are reliable, whether there is a sound research behind what you are reading, because sometimes there are just perceptions, and these perceptions are strictly related to an image of the world that some people want to give to us, and we have to be at least, let's say, able to put in place our critical thinking. So I suggest that you don't only read that literature, but be helped by others to find counterbalancing literature. Also because, as far as microcredit is concerned, it has not worked everywhere, but for a fact, it has worked in many countries. Not only, it has given the opportunity, especially when there is a coaching system as well, it has given the opportunity to develop, for instance, opportunities to individuals to develop their own sustainability, which is something that we should keep in mind, because when the Agenda 2030 says, leave no one behind, this is exactly what it means. Making sure that you reach every single individual and give an opportunity. I mean, I was talking to this gentleman this morning from Education Above All. I'm sorry, I don't remember all. Yes. And we were discussing also small farms, for instance, and the fact that women in small farms need to have an opportunity to have access, for instance, to small amounts of money to be able to find, to buy the necessary tools and maybe, seeds and others. These things are very relevant, and they make a complete change in societies. I remember myself in Albania 1991. I was on the top of a mountain in the middle of nowhere, seriously. And just to give you an example, the fact that on a village that was reachable only by climbing a mountain, I'm a good climber, fortunately, but I mean, that was the only way by which you could reach that place. The fact that I brought through the microcredit tools to build, hatchets and others, to build their own fences and things, changed the community completely. So they were able to cultivate some things and sell them in the market in the valley. So, and this is microcredit from the World Bank. The World Bank changed completely over the years. Now they are coming back with some ideas which we will take into consideration, because they want to start a system of microcredit through smartphones, although it is complicated for security reasons, because smartphones can be obviously accurate and so on. But this is a very good system. So I suggest be careful with the literature you read. Don't be fascinated by the pessimism, because sometimes it's fascinating, but it can be also poisoning.